Welcome back, Warrior Fam.
Yay!
Thank you for being here with us.
Yes.
I'm so grateful. Always, always. I feel like I say that exact same thing every day, every week when we record. It's just like, I can't believe you're here. Can't believe it. So
we
excited.
are grateful.
So grateful. All right. So our topic today is being too much. Some anxiety surrounding being too fill in the blank, like air quotes, too fill in the blank, end quotes.
Yeah.
Right. And just like what kinds of anxiety shows up with feeling like we are annoying, that we are too much, that we are troubling people, scaring them away,
dramatic, too emotional,
sensitive,
too talkative,
anxious, too anxious, right? It's like all the things.
Which is funny because we also talk about feeling not good enough. So we're not good enough, but we're also too much.
We can't win, warriors. That's what we've decided, is that like the world has decided somehow, or maybe it's just patriarchy. I have no idea. Somehow the world's decided that we're not only not enough, but we're also too much. It really is funny if you think about it. But a lot of it is feelings that we've put on ourselves. But it's based on, to me, it hasn't come out of nowhere, right? It's like based on messages that we were given as children.
Yeah.
Whether they were overt or covert, right? It's like I know I've been told you're too this before, right? You're too that, or you should probably try to calm down about that, or be less like this. And so like I needed, speaking for me, I always felt like, well, where is who I am wrong? Right. It's like if something is inherent to me, or even if it was learned, but I've adopted it as my truth, or being honest and true to myself, but you don't like it. Like the metaphorical, you don't like it. Does that mean that I'm wrong? Does that mean there's something wrong with me? Right. Am I crazy?
Right. No, I totally feel you. It's like if you're like super, super excited and you want to talk about something and someone's like, stop, you're being so annoying. It's like, wait, is there something wrong with me because I'm excited and I want to talk about this? Like, why are you rejecting me and my emotions? Like, am I the weird one? Are you the weird one? Like,
exactly. Right. That's exactly how I feel about it. It's just like, and it's almost impressive that person could project their discomfort with whatever it is we're putting out there. But at the same time, it's like, but is that fair? Is that reasonable? Like, am I projecting that to other people as well? And I know that just being honest and real as a flawed human, it's like, I've been in a situation too, where I've been in a conversation with a person or in an experience of some kind, and I'm like, that person's not for me because they're too fill in the blank. Right.
Yeah.
And does it always have to be a bad thing? I guess is my question for the ether.
Yeah.
Not really for you, but in general.
I mean, I'm going to answer for the ether.
You are the ether, so go for
I'm
it.
the ether. So, I mean, I think, we're not going to like everyone, but I think it's how you handle it, right? It's like, if you say to that person, stop, you're annoying, that's very different than just like giving distance from each other, like, I think we're not supposed to like everyone.
Yeah, no.
We can try to have empathy or compassion for everyone, but it doesn't mean we have to like and hang out with everyone. And as we grow and as we evolve, maybe the people we used to like, we no longer, feel the same way about. And so I think it's okay. I think it's how we communicate how we feel around that person. Because people are annoying, but when we're like, stop, you're being annoying, and we reject them, versus like, hey, I see you're really excited about this thing and you want to talk about it, but I don't have the time to listen right now.
Yeah,
right? Like,
totally. It's just the boundary setting, right? Always a thing. And what always trips me up too, it's like when people say to me or to other people, you're so X, right? And if you don't feel X inside, or certainly not all the time, you're like, but am I? I don't feel like I am. It's like I've been told I've been told a lot of things. Let's just be real. But I've been told a lot, like, you're so confident, you're so outgoing, you're so like talkative. Yes, I've been told that, but it's like that could be construed as like a negative or a positive thing, right? But for feeling, you're so confident, you're so self-assured, that feels very uncomfortable for me when I'm told that, because I don't feel those things on the inside, at least not all the time. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, not nowhere near all the time. Like maybe 10% of the time do I feel really confident or self-assured. So like hearing that from people, I wind up having some anxiety sometimes surrounding like, okay, well, I better hold up to that candle, right? I better hold up to that standard, or at least around that person. Otherwise I'm like somehow a fraud or something. I don't know.
It's this is who they think I am. So now I have to be this person.
Right.
Yeah.
But then another person might turn around and be like, you seem a little meek or introverted. And I'm like, yeah, I'm also those things too. Right. And that feels more like me on the inside to a certain extent. It's just so interesting. So like, how do you define too much?
Yeah. I mean, when I think about it in the anxiety sense, I think of it as kind of like a lot of what you said, like being annoying or coming off needy, or having big energy when other people don't have big energy, right? Like going into a space and like excited, happy, whatever, but like everyone's super like quiet or calm or whatever, and then like feeling like too much in the space. Or too much, like I remember like in middle school and high school, sometimes like I would feel really like socially anxious and I didn't know it and I would shut down, right? And then people would all try to fix how I was behaving, but that felt like too much. Like I was too much in the like being quiet and aloof and shutting down and pulling away. So it's like not always big energy. Sometimes it's too much low energy. Right. So I guess like I just define too much as showing up in a way that makes other people uncomfortable, where they might like reject you or pull away from you, I guess, is kind of like, or at least the fear of that, right? The fear of like, if I'm too needy, too big energy, too little energy, too big emotions, too talkative, too, much of that, then ultimately the fear is being rejected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
What about you?
Everything. No notes. No, like legit. That's like almost everything that was swam through my mind thinking about that. It's like, yeah, what does it mean to me to hear like you're too much? Like, I guess to a certain extent, I always felt like, it's all the things you said, dramatic, annoying, or we've been saying. I like that you brought in like the energy, right? Sometimes it doesn't even have to be verbalized. Yeah. It's just like if you're coming off a certain way without even the spoken word.
Yeah.
Which it's just like, now you can't even not say anything. You're somehow still screwed, or you're not. Yeah. So like I always was given the message to a certain extent that like before being extra was cool, right? Yeah. It was considered something that was like, it's like you're extra like guacamole, right? It's like now it's a badge of honor. And like before that, or most of certainly our childhoods and adolescence always felt like extra is not good, right? Yeah. You don't want to be extra. You don't want to be extra dramatic, because then it feels like it's too much of something, as we're saying. It's over the top. And for me, the biggest ones were always too opinionated, too loud, too sensitive, which sensitive just really translated into you have emotions. Yeah. Right. Like looking back in the rear view, it's like being sensitive, wasn't just that like, oh, I was always sad or scared or small and meager. It was like all the feelings kind of correlated into sensitivity. Yeah. And I feel like I resonated with what you said about the discomfort. It's like anytime I'm assuming I'm making another person experience discomfort of any kind. And it's going to eventually or inevitably or ultimately lead to them being like, bye.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're too much.
Yeah.
No thanks.
So no thanks. Moving on. And like so I've reached a place though, too. It's like, this is what middle age kind of does to a person too, which maybe we can talk more about, like, in this chat, it's just like, I have really embraced so much of my too muchness to a certain extent, is like, fuck it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, this is my one life.
Yeah. If you don't like it.
Yeah. Keep moving. Right. And if I don't like you, then I keep moving, and it doesn't always have to be said. You can just move on. And that's that. That's, I guess that's the privilege of living for a while. So like, if you're a warrior listener out there and you're like, oh, but I'm only 21, or I'm in high school, or you're a parent of someone that's in their adolescence or in their childhood, you know, you might be having your own memories or your own feelings about it, but also thinking about what kinds of message am I projecting to my children, my students, that kind of thing too. So like, for me, I'm not sure exactly how it started, right? But as I mentioned, being told you're too sensitive was like the biggest one. I don't know if it was like conditioned into us.
Yeah.
I think it was, to a certain extent. I think the other ones, you know, being too open, being too loud, too opinionated, too honest, too curious, was always, these always felt like bad things, like things I should be reining in, things that weren't ladylike. And again, I feel like I can only speak for myself as a woman. Patriarchy, heteronormative gender roles had been ingrained in us since childhood by the outside world, right? From the news, digital media, books, commercialism, just like literally everything, the world. But being told too sensitive, that was always the big one.
Wow.
And at the same time, I felt this mixed message being sent, because there were some people in my life that were like, but being sensitive is a really good thing, and it's okay to be sensitive. But then I always thought, are they just telling me that because they don't want me to feel bad about myself or about myself? Right. It's like, is that really how they feel? Or are they just telling me that because they don't want me to feel bad? Which, like, I guess that's a good thing, right? They don't want me to feel bad about being how I am. But at the same time, my instinct was to be like, but maybe it's just being told to me to like, you know, to kind of placate the situation.
Right.
So I was never told all the reasons why, though, sensitivity was wonderful. Right. So like,
okay.
It was one of those things where it's like, it's okay to be sensitive, right? It's okay that you're always crying, or that you're upset a lot, or that, you know, when you experience big emotions, you let them out. And it was never said why it was okay. Right. It was like the reason, the why, the how wasn't available, or wasn't made available. And obviously I've come to learn, right? Sensitivity is a wonderful gift. It produces empathy. It produces compassion. It means I'm paying attention. You know, it's like, I'm going to quote Glennon Doyle, because that's what I do. But she says, she was always told, why do you laugh so much? And it's the same reason why I cry so much. It's because I'm paying attention. And that just that thought was so life-changing for me. And I'll never forget the first time I heard it, and how I've been able to sort of embrace and embody that part of me, but only as an adult. Right. And so I guess my hope and my wish is that people listening, or people in general who are younger, come to see that their too muchness, like their sensitivity, their overreactions, or what's perceived as an overreaction, may be the correct feeling, right? It may be the reaction that's needed to instill change, or to get people to think differently or outside of the box. So for example, thinking about my childhood, the men in my life, right? My dad, and I have very good relationships with my dad, my older brother, you know, but the men in my life from the time I was little would tease. They tease a lot. They didn't just tease me, right? They'd tease my mom and my older sister. And a lot of it was jokes. It was making jokes. And to them, it was being silly and playful. And when I would kind of whine about it, or become kind of reclusive or quiet, or I'd storm off and slam my door, I'd go cry, the message was always, I'm only kidding. Don't be so sensitive. Right. It was like that exact sentence. And it was with, I mean, I really want to hammer home, it was with nothing but love, just true love. Like So, but this was confusing to me. It's like, but I'm showing you in my body and with my reaction that what you're saying or doing isn't good, right? It doesn't make me feel good. And so like, while you're kidding, or, you know, that's what you're saying, don't worry about it. I'm just being, and they would even say like, I'm just being stupid. I'm just being, you know, and it was like, they were acknowledging the fact that what they were saying or doing wasn't great. But at the same time, like, either they couldn't help themselves or it's just, who knows, right? It's part of their personality. Anyway. Mm-hmm. So I remember feeling like, oh, okay, so my instinctive feelings or reactions must be wrong, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm being too sensitive, that means that what my body and mind is telling me about what just happened, right? However simple or silly it might be. And in the rear view, it's like I was really sensitive about certain things that like really weren't that serious, right? But to me at the time, they were. And so like, but my reaction was, I guess my instincts are incorrect. I have to start curbing them because it's making them uncomfortable, right? As well as making people uncomfortable. And so like how the anxiety showed up is like, I started to see sensitivity as weakness and I didn't want to present as weak, right? So as I got older, when I reached like adolescence, like, I learned more control and I would quote unquote put on the brave face, pretend that things didn't bother me, laugh about them, even if I didn't find them funny, etc. And then I even started to adopt this behavior, right, as normal. And so I would hear myself saying to my friends, people I loved in high school, like, relax, I'm only joking, right? And it was like, I only thought about this, not even that long ago. Yeah. Sadly, right? It's like, oh man, like I was definitely like embodying those things that I hated as a kid. But then I came to learn was like, this must mean that I better be stronger. I better strap up, right? And be okay with certain things. And then I'm projecting, like, if you're sensitive about it, then you're weak. Right. And so I started projecting that onto people. And so like, as an adult, when I spent time reading about feelings, reading about children, becoming a teacher and then a kids yoga teacher, I had to unlearn so many things, which I feel like is just a marker for growth, right? It's a marker for growth, for becoming a better person, for becoming a more understanding and curious and compassionate person. Yeah. And so like, I don't want to hate on my younger self or on anyone that made me feel, like I was too sensitive or less than as a child, because I believe that we're all doing the best we can in the moment with the information that we have. But I had to unlearn so many things, right? And it's been a real practice for me to realize that my gut feelings and instincts are information, right? It's information about what I'm experiencing, and they aren't inherently wrong, if not wrong at all. So like a mix of things will come up for me, depending on the situation. First things first, I always do self check-ins. That's like the very first thing, right? Once I sort of notice like, okay, I'm having a feeling of to fill in the blank. And usually that is sensitivity, because that still is again, now it's my superpower, but in general, that's the thing that I'm the most to of. Yeah. So doing that self check-in, right? Asking myself about my discomfort, about the feeling, right? What's happening in this moment that's causing me to feel this way? So just lots of questions, lots of checking in with my body. Is this actually about my behavior, or is it a reflection of someone else's feelings? And after that, I'm better able to communicate after I've sort of done that mental check-in. I'm better able to communicate either with myself or with the other person or the party, right? Whoever I'm dealing with in that moment. What the interaction felt like or continues to feel like. So just like naming the feeling, right? Things like, what you just said hurt my feelings. Yeah. Right. Or like, I feel X when you behave like X. Or like, and just sort of trying to make it like using I statements while also being kind of open and curious about like not wanting to shut down sort of a dialogue that can maybe go forward about it. And so then I might follow up with asking about what their intention was for sharing that thing or saying that thing to me or in general, right? Yeah. Like just to sort of gain information and clarity about where they're coming from too. It's like, did you get raised in an environment where you were told you were too sensitive if you said X or Y? Where were the messages coming from for you, right? Like, and so just trying to be more curious and ask like, hey, that thing you said, I'll just stick with hurt me, right? That thing you said kind of, touched me the wrong way, rubbed me the wrong way. I feel a little bit hurt or wounded by it. Maybe I can't even explain why, but I do. Right. So like, was your intention to make me feel like insecure about that thing or hurt by it? Like, and more often than not, it's like, no, God, no, I wasn't intending for that at all. And so like trying to then get some clarity about the interaction and why and how it wound up that way. And then, once I'm able to have that kind of discomforting or uncomfortable conversation, I'm able to sort of better move on to the stage of acceptance. I may not be happy with the outcome. I may not hear the answer I want to hear. I may still feel like inadequate or upset or whatever, but like, at least I feel more and better informed. Right. And so like, I'm able to sort of move past that place of like not knowing why I feel the way that I feel. Right. And at least being like, okay, these are my feelings. I've communicated those feelings. Doesn't matter what the outcome is, as long as, I got those steps 1 and 2 out of the way. And then I can make decisions like, hey, now I'm looking for patterns with that person or those people. Right. And so if those things kind of keep creeping up and I keep feeling a certain way, then okay, I need to take a hard look at like my relationship with that person or that thing or that whatever situation and say, is this serving me? Do I feel good about it? And then either take a step back or lean in further even sometimes. So that's kind of what my process is for dealing with my feelings of like too sensitive. Because again, like we could talk for days about all the twos, right?
Right.
And the not enoughness. But like I wanted to kind of hammer home like this one that always has come up for me since childhood. So
yeah. I love that when situations arise, you ask about the intention, right? Because especially when like people are joking with each other, we don't necessarily know what button we might push. Right. And so instead of you just being like, nope, right? Like, I'm done with you. There's the opportunity to repair by being curious about that person's intention while letting them know what they did upset you. Right. And I really love that piece because I think that sometimes, and I can relate to feeling too sensitive as well. Sometimes it's just easier to not have the conversation. It's like, I'm too sensitive. I get worked up over everything. Like, is it even worth having this conversation? Because it's going to maybe drain me. Right.
Yeah.
But what happens is then there's no repair in the relationship, at least again, through my perspective. And then we might start pulling away rather than having the opportunity to repair with that person and understand their perspective. Right. Yeah. And I love that you said most of the time they're not intending to upset you. They have no idea that they've, upset you.
Right. Or they think that's right. And so like, it was less about the jokey nature that I kind of started out with and more about just like more adults kind of conversations. Right.
Right. Yeah. I also really like how you shared, I'm not saying I like this, but I like that you shared this, is that as a kid, what was modeled to you was this jokey behavior. And although you didn't really like it as a kid, you adopted it and then did it to others. And then it sounded like in some ways, judged others for being too sensitive in a sense. And it just goes to show like if someone walked in, like we were talking about labels at the beginning, if someone walked into your high school and saw you doing that, right? They might have labeled you as insensitive when you developed that pattern because of what was modeled to you and because you were getting the message from society to not be so sensitive. Right. And it just made me think about like, how often do we label people's behavior without knowing like, oh, they adopted this as a way to protect themselves. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I really appreciated that part of the story because it just made me think about how often do we put labels on kids when they're trying to, combat some label that's been put on them. And now they're trying to act a new way, even though it's maybe not them.
Yeah.
I also really liked that you brought up the too loud. That was something I heard so much as a kid and it always made me feel horrible. And now I would just say fuck you to all the people that told me I was too loud. How dare you? I'm sorry. I'm excited. I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm happy talking to people. But I guess, the one question that I really had as you shared this and you kind of did answer it, but like, it just kept popping up is like, okay, Margot, if you could go back in time and talk to younger Margot about her, sensitive nature, It sounded like she needed more explanation about why it was okay, but what would you tell her?
I would tell her, young Margot, that, all the things that you're witnessing and feeling that make you want to cry or have big feelings of any kind is nothing but information. There's nothing wrong with your reactions to things. And that hopefully by embracing that part of you, that deeply feeling part of you, you're giving permission to those around you to deeply feel.
Yeah.
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 I just want to say, like, I love being silly, especially with my family. Like, we're very close. Like, we do nothing but lovingly tease on each other. And like, as a fully formed adult, right, I'm able to process all of that very differently. But again, it goes to like, when you aren't explicitly, or overtly talking to all children, but certainly some children, about their reactions to things, about their sensitivities, about about anything. And I want to believe it's because you're uncomfortable and you want me to stop making you uncomfortable, right? My reaction to what you said or did is making you uncomfortable. And even though I know your intention wasn't to make me cry or upset or worried or whatever, that doesn't change how I feel about it. And so trying to remember that, everything we say and do, there can be consequences to those things.
Yeah.
And not all of them are severe or like things we should be like, oh my God, I wasn't a scarred child. I did not have a traumatic childhood by any means. I had a very happy, wonderful upbringing and family life. But just, I would just say, like, if anything I shared kind of triggered something in you reflectively, or if you think you've talked to your own children or students in that way, and believe me, I'm still guilty of it. Like, these aren't things that you just necessarily grow out of just from learning and reading. And I want to say that too. It's like, I'm a much better person than I was. I hope I am. I hope we all are, because of the life experiences that we've had, and we're able to grow and become, newer, better, more interesting people, and more well-rounded people who are able to have a nuanced view of how people treat us, how we treat other people. And I'll just take it as a plus if I can reflectively, even in the rear view, say like, wow, I kind of fucked that up, or I shouldn't have said it like that, and I'm sorry, and I can see that I've hurt you and I'm sorry. So like, this is not coming from a person, I'm not sharing this as a person who's perfected, saying things correctly to people, because I'm certainly not that person. But I think that's all I wanted to say on it.
Yeah. And I mean, I also think that, context is helpful, and that in the 80s and 90s, like, feelings weren't really validated.
No.
They weren't. Like, it was like, oh, I'm joking, get over it. Like, my uncles, I remember, would do that stuff all the time, even when I was upset. And it was out of a loving way, right? But for me, I'm like, I'm not getting over it. I'm upset. Like, now I'm gonna go, like, not interact with you. Like,
you learn how to put on the brave face or just disassociate. Right.
And neither it was out of love, but we didn't know as much back then. Like, the grown-ups didn't know as much, so we didn't know as much.
Correct. And it's hard. Look, it's hard to read people's signals too, right? And if somebody isn't as vocal about them being upset by something you said or did, or then it may take a lot of work and practice to sort of become aware of the impact that what you said and did had on a person. And they may never tell you. They may just walk out of your life, and that might be that. And we all kind of have to live with that reality, right? It's not always things that we can have a conversation. A person may just say, well, that person said something not okay, and I'm not okay with it. And they just leave your life, and there may not be room for that kind of conversation or, repair. But there also is room for it, right? Even if it takes you a long time, like till you're in like your 30s to learn, like, okay, here's some ways to navigate, having an awkward conversation, or even if it's with myself, right? Trying to check in with why I feel the way I do. Why am I reacting in this way? It's all just helpful information.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's hear your too much story.
Too much. I mean, I love how you really broke it up. It was like too sensitive. Again, I really love too loud. Like that one really hit me in my heart. I got that a lot. I got that a lot from my teachers, and like that one still hurts. Like if someone tells me nowadays I'm being too loud, right? Like I am like wanting to scream at them.
Like, you haven't heard loud.
Yeah, you want to know loud? Like, I'm sorry. Maybe I don't have great hearing. I mean, I think my hearing's fine, but like to me, I'm not too loud. I'm sorry if I have a loud voice, but I'm not sorry because why would I apologize for my voice? But you know what I'm saying? So anyway,
right.
I love how you broke it up. I feel like for me, like the crux, the like core of the too much that I'll talk about is it's a mixture of very intense emotions, and my emotions would drive my behavior. And I didn't have emotional regulation. I very poor emotional regulation skills growing up. Even now, it's like on my weaker end of skills.
Yes.
And those emotions led me to have like a lot of like drama, right? Like, oh my God, like I can't believe my friend left me out, like, and then talk about it with everyone. And, but a lot of that came from just ultimate fear of rejection and abandonment, right? And so, but it was this like cycle. And so, had I known when I was, a middle schooler and high schooler that my emotions and the intensity of the emotions was part of being a teen and part of like an adolescent brain, that would have really helped a lot. But at the time, and even in my early 20s, like the emotions were so overwhelming. It was like when I had big emotions, they needed to pour out, they needed to express themselves. And a lot of times it was through talking, right? If they were more like pleasant, high energy emotions. Or it would be like shutting down and being by myself if it was like unpleasant and like low emotions, right? Or sensations. Yeah. So one of the stories that I thought about when we were talking about feeling too much was a story about when I did get rejected for being too much. So I had gotten back from my trip to Australia. I was like, I don't know, 23, 24, 25. I can't really remember. I'm not going to do the math right now. And part of the reason I had gotten back when I did was because my grandpa got sick when I was in Australia. And by the time I came back, he had passed. So I didn't get to see him. And it was like the hospitals made the mistakes, right? So it wasn't like he was ill or anything like that. And so at the time I was staying with a friend and I was grieving, and, I felt guilt for not making it back in time, even though, there was no reason to feel guilty. But I was also grieving over the loss of my adventure. I had gone to Australia by myself. I had made all these friends. There was the fun of adventure, and all of that was gone, right? And so there was the grief over that transition. And at the time, I hadn't gone to yoga or mindfulness practice, or hadn't found yoga or mindfulness practices, and I hadn't gone to therapy, right? So I had all of this chaos inside of me. And the only way that I really knew how to deal with it was through partying. And so I would ask my friends to go hang out, right? And I really I needed attention. I needed care. And I didn't know how to ask for those things because I didn't understand my situation that I was in. And so I would ask my friends to go out, and then I would just drink and I would flirt and I would look for reassurance through my friends and through the attention of men to make me feel better. But of course, seeking attention while feeling utterly horrible on the inside.
Right.
And then drinking was not like the ideal way of handling all of that. And it ended up adding more drama and more suffering. I, would say or do things when I had been drinking that then the next day I would regret. And then my mind would constantly beat me up on what I did. And so then I would seek reassurance from my friends that I wasn't like such an embarrassment. And I wasn't like, you know, I mean, even like stuff like dancing on the table or telling someone I thought they were cute, like wasn't my typical behavior if I wasn't drinking. And so then I would be mortified the next day by my behavior, and I would seek reassurance from my friends. And I had one friend that I sought a lot of reassurance from, and probably in some sense used her as a therapist, even though she wasn't a therapist. She was just a friend. And so right around that time, she started dating this guy, and this guy didn't like me. Like, we were total opposites. Like, I was to him annoying and too loud and too dramatic. And she started to pull away. And she never told me about it. We never had a conversation about it, right? And our friendship, she basically like ghosted me for a while. And a few years later, we got back together, and she said, there was a lot going on with her, and then there was a lot going on with me. And basically my narrative is like, yeah, she didn't know how to communicate to me that I was too much and I should have gone to therapy. So she pulled away. But at the time, the narrative also was, when you're too much, people will abandon you. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that really like carried through, especially like when I was making new friends or when I was dating. I wanted to be reserved. I wanted to pull back, right, and not be too much for fear of people, which worked out when I learned yoga and mindfulness and I went to therapy. But it didn't always work out with my like anxiety, right? Like when anxiety comes out, it's a lot. And so this fear really like permeated through like a lot of my life. Like it permeated through work. I never wanted to be too much at work. I didn't want to ask too many questions, right? I didn't want to need too much help. It permeated in my different relationships with friends and in romantic relationships. I didn't want to be too needy. But then like even now, right? Like when I first met Dan, I told him like, hey, I got anxiety, and when my anxious attachment system is activated, I'm going to need more reassurance. And he's really great with that. Right. And I've communicated that to my friends. But like, even now, right, like in 2022, sometimes I get excited and I text you a bunch of things. I'm using you as an example. There's other friends too. And then I'm like, oh my God, it's too much. It's too much. And I will like not text you anymore for fear of being too much. And I wait until you respond. And I'm not like, oh, she needs to respond immediately. I know you do your thing with your phone, right? But I'll like be like, no, I can't be too much. Maybe Margot will reject me, or whichever friend will reject me. Right. So the fear still pops up. I communicate about it better. I don't let it like dominate my like, I don't walk through life like totally afraid of rejection and abandonment. But even in little moments where I have big energy, big emotions that want to be expressed, I sometimes am afraid if I am doing too much texting, too much communicating, too much complaining, too much, it'll be too much. Margot might need space, right? Maybe she won't like abandon me. And again, I'm using you as a placeholder for a few friends, but you are one of them that comes up in my mind where I'm like, right. And so that's like something that I'm still working on, but I feel like in the friendships that I have right now, we all just communicate with each other.
Right.
Like, wow, that was a lot of text, right? Or like, I mean, honestly, like we don't even say that with each other, but I'm sure that would be said if that felt like a lot. Right.
Right.
And so now, like what you said, a lot of what I do to navigate this is I just communicate, right? With Dan, I communicated my fears around being rejected, around being abandoned, right? With you, I communicate with you. With my mom, I communicate with her. Like a lot of it is communication. Sometimes it's about asking, like when I'm having big emotions, when I'm having big feelings, it's asking about like, hey, am I making a big deal out of this, or is this a big deal? Right. Sometimes I need that type of reassurance. And then ultimately what I've really learned about feeling too much and the fear of abandonment and rejection that goes with it is that when I'm feeling like I'm too much, I also can reject and abandon myself. And so, like you said, sometimes you have to have a conversation with yourself. It's the same with me. It's like, hey, you're feeling like a lot, but you're also ignoring that you're feeling like a lot. Let's see what's going on here. Like, let me not reject myself, right?
Yes.
Since I'm so afraid of other people doing it, don't do it to myself. Don't abandon myself in this discomfort. Show up for myself. And then sometimes that just works out everything else, you know? And so that's been the practice lately when that discomfort and fear of being too much comes up.
Yeah. It's like, don't emotionally gaslight your own self.
Yes.
Right. It's like such a sad thing that we have to communicate that to our own brains, but it's just so real. Like it's just honest.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that you started with poor emotional regulation skills, because that is definitely still an active practice for me. It doesn't matter how many days a week I'm practicing yoga, or like how often I feel like I'm embodied, and it's like 5 minutes can go by and I'll be a totally different person. So I really want to validate that. And I value you saying it, and that's an active practice. I mean, you said it's way better than it used to be. Certainly, way better, right? Way better. But it's still something that, of all the things that still crop up, it's up there.
You know, I took a VIA like institute personality test or whatever, strengths-based test. What are your strengths? And I forget the number. There's like 30 total. I'm making that up, but there's over 20. And emotional and self-regulation was like in the bottom 5 of my strengths. Like, it's just, I'm coming to accept it. Like,
yes, I was about to say acceptance time.
Yeah. I'm still practicing. It's just not a strength.
There you go. Right. Yeah. I love that. I'm still practicing, but it's not a strength. Not everything that we actively practice is going to suddenly become something we're really good at.
Yeah.
Not even close. You know, what kept coming up for me as you were talking, and you said the word several times, was just your ability that grew, right? This sort of muscle that you built surrounding your communication skills, right? Just like, I didn't necessarily resonate with like using the partying as a means of coping with your lack of understanding about what you were coping with, what you were dealing with the like loss of the adventure, the loss of a family member, you know, returning home from not just a little adventure, but a really long, life-changing one. So like, and wanting to maybe keep that going to a certain extent, possibly. And so like, but I could resonate with the alcohol part, right? It's like, for me, alcohol has always been a source of helping me to calm down. I mean, it sounds fucked up, right? But I mean, like it's a means of like not inhibiting myself, right?
Yeah.
And I think that as people who are, you know, in their early 20s, right, or maybe even mid 20s, it was that times 1,000, right? So it's like, if I have like a glass of wine to just sort of like veg out at the end of the day, I've had a really stressful day. Like, I'm not an alcoholic, right? I'm not looking at that as like a need. It certainly isn't, but it does the job, right? It's like, okay, I'm able to sort of like sink into this moment and just like enjoy a glass of wine, you know, like whatever it is, or I'm able to go out and have a conversation with a friend, and I feel a little bit more calm and comfortable if I have a glass once in a while. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong or bad about that. So like, let's just be real about like, there are the upsides to enjoying a drink every once in a blue moon, and then there's like using it as a means of like, I need this to live and to cope. And so like, I value you bringing that up, because I feel like A, it's relatable, and B, it's not just relatable generally, but it's relatable for that time in your life. Right. And when you kind of brought up about like, you didn't know what it was you were experiencing. You didn't understand or have the tools through therapy or through yoga and mindfulness like that we have now, or that you have now, or just a few years after that point, right? When you found those things, that you were able to, that you had no tools, you had no skills for understanding all the emotions that you were experiencing in that time. You didn't have professionals to talk to. You didn't have a means of self-curiosity. And so I value you bringing all of that up. And I just, going back to the loudness, like I just speaking for myself, like when you are excited and you're speaking louder, I feel excited. Right? Like I just want you to know, since that's something that still feels weird for you, or like you assume like I'm too much, I'm too loud or whatever. Like to me, like that always makes me feel better or more excited about something, whether it's for me, for you, for us, for life, or whatever. Like your energy to me is contagious in a good way. Right. But like, that's why we're friends and we connect. Right. I get that that's not going to be the case for everybody. Right. And so like, I just want to also acknowledge that, like, I think your loudness, your energy, your, what you project feels nothing but glowy and warm and loving, and like you could be wrapped in it. So like, I love that about you. I love that loudness. And so like, it's just another testament to what we think is wrong with us sometimes is the thing that other people love so much about us.
I love that you would be wrapped up in my loudness. Like,
because it feels like Abby's excited and I'm excited. And you're like, you validate my happiness and my joy. Right.
Yeah.
Even if it's something that has nothing to do with you.
Right.
And so like, that makes me feel good. Right. It's like that the way you rely on your support group, right? Your friends, your community, whatever. So to me, it's like, I feel like your loudness is projecting like your joy, right? It's projecting your big emotion, which I value, even if it's a discomforting emotion. Like, you're being who you are. And like, I have respect for that. Maybe I wouldn't have 20 years ago. I don't know, but I do now.
I mean, that's like, I really like you saying that because one, it makes me feel better, but like, also like, it would have been really nice because in high school and middle school, my loudness would get me punished. I would laugh with a friend and I would get kicked out of class, right? Or I would speak up about an injustice in the classroom and I would get kicked out of class. Or, I would be talking to someone about an assignment, but my voice was loud and I would be called out and shamed in front of the class, right?
Right.
And if the teacher had reflected, and again, this is the 90s, so, doing the best we can, but like, hey, you're really excited. And when you're excited, it changes the sound of your voice. And when you're loud, it's harder for me to teach. That would have provided so much more information for me than kicking me out of class or shaming me in class, And so that's actually been like, when I teach kids in schools, I love doing classes on being loud and silent and us all noticing how we feel in it. And then like, my hope is that the teachers know there's nothing wrong with loudness. And if there is, explain why. It's distracting other students. It's making it harder for the teacher to teach, or, anyway, so I appreciate the validation of wanting to be wrapped up in my loudness, because the high school version of me like would always get punished for being loud. And I wasn't doing it intentionally. I just had big emotions. So thank you.
I love that. I love that you added that piece too. It's like, I wasn't doing something intentionally, right? And it goes kind of like with my story or what we were talking about from the beginning. It's like, what was the intention behind something? And it's like, if that teacher or that person or that friend that had kind of abandoned you after a while of, her partner not being a fan or whatever, had just been able to sort of say like, right. If you'd been able to have that conversation or have it be said to you like, hey, your energy is a little bit intense for me sometimes. Right. Like, and it to me, that's not an insult. No. I mean, I guess anybody could take it. Maybe she was worried that if she told you, you would reject her. So she felt like it was safer and easier for her to just move on. Right. And and so it's just like that's why communication from your whole story just really kept cropping up. And I also just value you bringing up how it trickled down into different areas of your life, right? It's not just your romantic relationships. It was in your work and your family and your friendships, so like so much of our like too muchness or whatever, it's not really wrapped up in a bow with just one aspect of our life. It's like, I'm not just overly sensitive with my partner. I'm also overly sensitive with like anything. Right.
Yes. Yeah. So, and it might manifest differently. You might have different behaviors when you're feeling oversensitive with your partner versus in a work situation. Right. But it's still there. It just shows up differently based on different situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely. Oh my gosh. So, you had mentioned at some point that like, or it sounded like you were saying that you were hiding parts of yourself. Like there was a moment in your story where you were like, if I do X, I'll be rejected. Like you mentioned with me as your example. It's like, if I text Margot 5 times in a row, I better stop texting now and wait for like pause here, wait for a response before I, keep going or whatever, or I need to seek reassurance for this or whatever it is. Right. So like when you notice that you're starting to hide parts of yourself, right? Even in that sort of minutia, like that small way, what is like the immediate practice?
I mean, so like a bunch of different thoughts came in my head because like back in the day, it was very different, right? Like back in the day, like years ago, it was just suppress, right? Like,
right.
It was like, I'm feeling too much, shut down. I'm feeling too much. Don't let everyone see, like, so in like high school and in my early 20s, like one of my favorite songs was Reflection from the movie Mulan.
Yes.
Because I felt like I could never be myself. Right. And so anyway, so that was something that I always felt like I had to hide the too much bigger pieces of me. Right. Nowadays, when things come up where I'm feeling like, is it too much? I just ask myself, like, is it too much? And is this a person that I'm safe to be too much with? So like for you, like, I got really excited about the idea of us getting Ryan Reynolds on the show, which is not gonna, I mean, who knows? Maybe it'll happen. Please, Ryan Reynolds. But he recently had an article about having anxiety and how he feels like different people in different situations. And I was like, oh my God, we have to get him on. And I feel like I sent you like 3 or 4 texts, right? And so and then I was like, okay, like I'm very excited, even though I hope this happens, but I don't know how it could happen. Anyway. And so then I paused and I was like, is this okay? Can I keep texting her? Should I wait? Is this, too much? Whatever. I like paused and I like pulled myself back so I could like see the situation out of my emotions. Right. And then I was like, okay, it's fine. It's not too much. Right. So I guess like what my practice is when I notice the feeling of being too much, I pause and I ask myself, like I pull myself out of my emotions to get some clarity. Right. I also pretty much know these days who I feel comfortable being too much with. Right. So like,
just being yourself with.
Well, yes, being myself, but there is still a spectrum because like when my dad was ill, that was a lot. And I learned very quickly who I could communicate it with. Right. And so it wasn't like I was hiding pieces of myself with the people I wasn't speaking to about it. It's just at that point, it was more, the word just slipped out of my head, but it was being intentional in what I shared.
Right.
Right. And so there's like a variety of layers of being too much and just knowing like my friends that have kids probably care a little bit less if I have drama. They have their own stuff going on. Right. I might save those drama stories for people who don't have kids. Right. So like, I know kind of like who I can go to for what. And if the feelings of too much come, then, I try to pull myself out of my emotions to get clarity. Right.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm like, oh my God, this is too much, I'm being too much, then I sit with myself and do other practices. But the in the moment is like, oh, I feel like I'm being too much. Let me pause and reassess this with like giving my emotions a chance to like pass through.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. It's just, it feels tangible.
Yeah.
It feels like, and I just love the separation that you're able to offer yourself of like, okay, let's try to look at the situation a little bit more objectively. Like you were doing this motion with your hand of just like, you're reaching for something, but then you pull back on it and your fingers kind of curled in. And I love that visual too, because it's like, I could just see like pulling the bubble off of something, right? Exposing it for what it really is and trying to look at it from a more objective place.
Yeah. I mean, that's so, y'all know I have anxiety and ADHD, and part of ADHD is impulsivity. It really, really is, right? Like I don't interrupt people to be a jerk. right? And I've worked on it, and the working on it has gotten better over the years. Really, like my impulsivity, my self-regulation, not so much. My impulsivity has. But that's part of the pulling back, is because sometimes I impulsively will like text you 5 texts. And then the pulling back is like, okay, wait, is this like impulsive? Does this need to be said? Is it too much? Is it fine? Yeah. Right. And, you know, and so that's, that's definitely like a go-to. And that is just part of like the mindfulness practice of the pause.
Yes. I know we both had the pause in there. I love it. So good.
Yeah.
So good.
Thanks.
All right, warriors. Well, you are too loved by us.
Yes.
You are overly amazing. You are extra fabulous. We love you so much. And we hope that any of this lands for you out there listening. Just like, what have been the messages you received maybe in childhood, in your adolescence, in your adulthood, in your now times, whatever stage of your life you're in. If you could think about it reflectively and in this moment, have there been messages that you've been given about you being too much or to fill in the blank? What were those messages? How did they make you feel? What comes up for you? What came up for you while you heard us talk? You know, sort of take the time maybe today or this week to think about, maybe even write down or journal some of the things that you've been told over the years and your experience of them. And how is your relationship to being too fill in the blank changed over the years? Has the two fill in the blank changed at all? Is it all the same stuff? Maybe you feel too much in other aspects of your life that are different from childhood. Have you come to love and embrace those parts of yourself? Are you still actively practicing loving those parts of yourself? Or the things you're working on, trying to not necessarily change, but just be more mindful of, be more aware of, be more curious about. So hopefully you can take some time today or this week to think about your too muchness or your not enoughness and say, fuck that.
Yes.
And I can love on myself regardless of all of that. And at least find the ways to communicate how I'm feeling about those things with yourself or with the people that are saying them to you.
Yes. And then find a Margot who wants to wrap herself up in your too muchness.
Yes. And an Abby who will share with you like in the middle of the night about Ryan Reynolds coming on our podcast. Not really, but hey, Ryan Reynolds, we know you're listening. Let's put that in the universe.
Yes.
Somebody will hear this that happens to know Ryan Reynolds, and they're going to reach out and
he will share his anxiety warrior story with us.
Yes. Let's get those big dreams out there in the world. All right, warriors.
So, Margot, yes. Do you have a win of the week? Win of the week.
I do have a win this week. Okay. Speaking of loving on yourself and acceptance, regardless of whatever, I happen to feel like I have great boundaries. I've come to love my boundaries. And it's always nice and validating when other people see and love those boundaries. Like recently we talked to Sanjoria and she was like, you know, boundaries were one of her superpowers. And I felt like, even though I feel really good about my boundaries, listening to her, I was like, ooh, I could even be better about boundaries. Yes. Shout out Sanjoria, episode 50. Check it out. So this past week I was, you know, I meet virtually with my book club, the women in my book club. And one of them said out loud to the whole group how much she loves and values and appreciates the boundary setting that I've share in our Instagram group, that we have an Instagram chat. We, you know, share things with each other throughout the day, throughout the week. And then we meet once a week. And having her, and then subsequently a few of the other women be like, yeah, like, you know, chime in with like, yeah, I think it's amazing how like you stand up for yourself, you advocate for your body, your mind, your needs, you know, throughout the week. Or you tell us like, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it because of X, Y, and Z. And like, it feels like a point of pride for you. And it's because it is a point of pride, but like having it be reflected to me without me asking, like, hey, how do you all feel about my boundaries? Was just felt amazing. And it was such a win because it's like, okay, I'm not shutting people out by putting up boundaries. I'm not, you know, let's keep with the theme, right? I'm not too closed off or walled off or too, uninterested or whatever. I'm all of those things. I'm everything, hopefully, but I'm also able to know when it's time to pause, to step back, to rest, to take a break, to communicate my needs. And it just was wonderful to have that reflected back to me. So that was my win.
That's a huge win. And I love how this is something you've been practicing, but in the practice, sometimes you're like, oh, I don't want to come off a different way. Right. Yep. And yet when you heard Sanjoria's, you're like, damn, she is amazing at this. Right. And like, I'm sure you didn't think like, oh, she's aloof or she's, like whatever. And so I love, first of all, how we all can see these traits we admire in others and then want them, but then like, are like, oh my God, is it okay?
Yeah.
Right. But then like, right. You weren't like, hey, all, how am I doing with my boundary setting? Like it just was acknowledged, like, cause it is an admirable trait to have. And it is a practice, right? Especially when we grow up not learning about it at all. And so what a great win.
Yeah. I was just thinking like growing up, not learning about it. And it's like, I feel like I learned the word boundaries in the way that we think about it now, like 5 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
Same here.
It feels like so recent.
Yeah.
That like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So that was my win. Thank you. Yeah, it was a good one. All right, warriors. Thank you so much for being with us this week and every week. We love you so dearly. You are everything to us. And we'd love to hear from you. If you're looking to connect with us in any way, you can find us on Instagram at Anxiety Warriors Podcast. Feel free to shoot us an email at anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. Let us know your wins of the week, your thoughts on the pod, topic ideas you have for us. You'd love to hear us talk on. If you think you'd be a great fit as a guest on our show, we'd love to connect. Let's help you tell your story on our platform. We'd love to have you. Check out our merch store. We have some great stuff up there. Click on the link in our show notes to shop Anxiety Warriors swag. And warriors, please, if you have 2 seconds, which come on, you're holding your phone right now, or at least it's within a foot of your body. We have to assume. Smash that 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube, Anxiety Warriors Podcast. All our episodes are up there. Thanks to Abby. And we love you.
Yes. We do. Thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. We're so grateful y'all are here.
Till next time.